Legend says you could hear his screams for a mile. A king of England murdered in the dark. Not with a blade or poison, but with a red-hot poker. A death so brutal, so degrading, it was designed to leave no mark. To erase the man, but not the terror. This is the story of a King Edward II. A king whose greatest crime was not treason, but love. And whose reign was not a chapter of history, but a cautionary tale. A tragedy of a man born to be a king, who wanted to be anything but. To understand the fall, you must first understand the shadow. His father was a giant. King Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots. He was a man forged in battle with a will of iron. He was everything a medieval king was meant to be. Ruthless, brilliant, and feared. He built stone castles that clawed at the sky. He crushed rebellions with an iron fist. He was a legend in his own time. And then there was his son. Edward of Caernarfon was not his father's son. Not in spirit. He was tall, handsome, and strong. The perfect image of a king. But behind the royal facade was a different soul. He shunned the war council for the company of labourers. He preferred the boisterous laughter of simple folk to the hushed reverence of his court. Chroniclers wrote with disdain that he enjoyed digging ditches and thatching roofs. He was a king with the heart of a commoner. This the nobility could have perhaps forgiven. But there was something else. A connection so deep, so all-consuming it would become a poison. A poison that seeped into the very foundations of his rule. His name was Piers Gaveston. Gaveston was not of high birth. He was a Gascon knight, witty, arrogant, and dangerously charming. To the English court, he was an upstart, a foreigner. But to Edward, he was everything. Theirs was a bond forged not of duty, but of raw, undeniable affection. They were inseparable. Brothers in arms, and perhaps something more. A love so fierce, it blinded the young prince to all else. When Edward I died, his final command was to keep Gaveston in exile. But the new King Edward II's very first act was to defy his father's dying wish. He summoned Gaveston back to England. And he didn't just bring him to court. He showered him with power. He made him Earl of Cornwall, a title reserved for royalty. He gave him lands, castles, and a fortune. And at his own coronation, Edward committed the ultimate sin in the eyes of the court. Beside him sat his new bride, the beautiful and proud Isabella of France. But the king's eyes were only for one man. He granted Gaveston the highest honour of carrying the royal crown. He lavished him with jewels intended for the Queen herself. In front of the entire nobility of England and France, Edward humiliated his wife and declared his heart to the world. He had chosen his favourite over his kingdom. The barons were enraged. This was not just favouritism. This was an insult to God, to the Queen, and to every noble house in the realm. They saw Gaveston's influence as a disease, a threat that had to be cut out. They marched on the king, their swords drawn. Their demand was simple and brutal. Exile Piers Gaveston forever, or face civil war. The young king, barely a year on his throne, was trapped. Torn between the man he loved and the crown he was born to wear. He chose the crown for now. He sent Gaveston away, his heart breaking. But for a king ruled by his heart, separation was not an end. It was merely a delay. And the consequences of that love were only just beginning to unfold. A king can survive a rebellion. He can even survive a war. But no king can survive betrayal from within his own bedchamber. While Edward mourned his lost favourite, another power was watching, learning, waiting. His Queen Isabella, known to history as the She-Wolf of France. She had endured the humiliation. She had watched her husband lavish love and riches on another man. For years, she played the part of the dutiful wife. She bore him 4 children, including a male heir securing the dynasty. She was patient, but her patience had a limit. And Edward, lost in his own grief, was about to push her past it. With Gaveston gone, a new favourite soon emerged. Hugh Despencer. He and his father were ambitious, greedy, and cruel. They manipulated the king-seized lands and alienated what little support Edward had left. They were even more hated than Gaveston. And this time, the king refused to let them go. For Queen Isabella, this was the final straw. It was no longer about a rival for her husband's affection. It was about her own survival and the future of her son, the young Prince Edward. She saw her husband not as a king, but as a puppet. A man controlled by the Despensers, driving England towards ruin. Her opportunity came in 1325. A diplomatic crisis erupted with France. As the sister of the French king, Isabella was sent to Paris to negotiate a peace treaty. Edward foolishly thought he was sending a loyal envoy. In reality, he was sending his own executioner. In Paris, far from her husband's control, Isabella began to plot. She was no longer a scorned wife. She was a political force. And she was not alone. She found a new ally, a man who shared her hatred for Edward and the Despensers. His name was Roger Mortimer. Mortimer was a powerful English baron who had been imprisoned by Edward for treason. He had escaped to the Tower of London in a daring feat and fled to France. He was a ruthless military commander, a man of action. And in Paris, he and Queen Isabella became more than just allies. They became lovers. Together, they forged a pact. A vow to invade England, depose King Edward, and destroy the Despensers. They declared themselves liberators, fighting to free the kingdom from a corrupt and incompetent ruler. They gathered an army of mercenaries. They secured ships. All while Edward remained oblivious in England, begging his dearest wife and sister to come home. He had no idea that she was coming back. Not as a queen, but as a conqueror. In September, the invasion began. Isabella and Mortimer landed on the English coast with a small force. But they didn't need a large army. The country was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The people were sick of the Despensers' greed. The barons were tired of Edward's weak rule. As Isabella marched inland, her support swelled. Lords who had once sworn loyalty to Edward now flocked to her banner. The king's regime collapsed like a house of cards. There was no great battle, no heroic last stand. The country simply abandoned its king. Edward, with Despencer by his side, fled London in a panic. He tried to reach Wales, hoping to find sanctuary. But it was too late. His own kingdom had turned against him. Betrayed by his wife, abandoned by his nobles, and hunted by his lover's army, the king was now a fugitive. He was captured in a damp Welsh field in November, a broken and defeated man. Hugh Despencer met a horrifying end. He was publicly tried as a traitor and a sodomite. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered. His entrails were burned before his eyes while he was still alive. But for the king, a different fate was planned. He was a king, an anointed monarch. You could not simply execute him. He was taken to Berkeley Castle, a cold, grim fortress. There in the darkness of his cell, his reign was over. But his story was about to enter its most terrifying and mysterious final chapter. Berkeley Castle. Its stone walls have seen centuries of secrets, but none are darker than the one whispered about its most famous prisoner. By early 1327, Edward II was king in name only. He was a pawn in a game played by his wife and her lover, Roger Mortimer. His son, the 14-year-old Edward III, was now on the throne. But real power lay with them. The deposed king was a problem. As long as he lived, he was a symbol, a rallying point for anyone who might dare to challenge the new regime. Plots to free him began to circulate. The very existence of Edward was a threat that Mortimer and Isabella knew they had to eliminate. The official story is that on the 21st of September, 1327, the king died. The castle records state he passed away from natural causes, his body weakened by his ordeal. But no one believed it. His constitution was famously strong, and the stories that began to leak from the castle walls painted a far more gruesome picture. The legend, a story that has echoed through the ages, is one of unimaginable cruelty. To murder a king without leaving a mark on his body, his killers devised a truly diabolical plan. They held him down. They forced a metal horn deep inside him, and through it, they thrust a searing red-hot poker. The heat would destroy his internal organs, killing him instantly. His screams would be muffled by the castle's thick walls, and his body, when presented to the world, would show no outward sign of violence. It was the perfect murder, a death designed to punish him for his alleged sins, a symbolic and horrific end for a king accused of unnatural love. For centuries, this was the accepted story, a grim footnote in the annals of English history. But history is rarely so simple. Was the tale of the poker a lie? A piece of brilliant black propaganda, perhaps spread by Mortimer and Isabella themselves? A warning to anyone who dared defy them? There are doubts. A letter discovered centuries later throws everything into question. The Fieschi letter, written by an Italian cleric, claims Edward was never murdered at all. It suggests that he escaped Berkeley Castle before the assassins arrived. That another body, possibly a castle porter, was gruesomely mutilated and buried in his place. According to this letter, the deposed king fled to the continent. He lived out his days in secret. A wandering hermit, a ghost of a king hidden away in Italian castles and monasteries. A man forever haunted by what he had lost. So what is the truth? Was Edward II the victim of one of history's most brutal assassinations? Or was he the architect of one of its greatest escapes? Did his screams echo from the dungeons of Berkeley Castle? Or did he die peacefully? An old man in a foreign land, his secrets buried with him. We may never know for certain. His tomb at Gloucester Cathedral became a site of pilgrimage. People prayed to the failed king, seeing him as a martyr. But whether they were praying for a murdered saint or for a king who simply vanished remains history's most chilling mystery. His life was a tragedy of a crown he never wanted, and his death a puzzle that time has yet to solve. The story of Edward II forces us to ask, is history written by the victors or by the whispers in the dark? Which medieval horror, which forgotten royal secret should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. For more journeys into the forgotten chapters of history, from cursed castles to royal betrayals, make sure you subscribe. And hit the notification bell so you never miss a descent into the madness of the past.